So I didn't really plan any of this out or anything. I just kind of came up with the idea to go through this triptych that I've been working on the last 5 years roughly, because the most recent one, or the final one, Honest Work, is now available on Amazon, and I stopped working on it a few days ago. So I guess I'll just start from the beginning. Like I said, there's really no structure plan to this other than just going through the books one by one to talk about them. I've been considering doing a web series, probably called Nobody Asked or something like that. Just talking about these books because I think it's fun and it's honestly just therapeutic and nice for me. It's a good, healthy thing for me to exhaust my mind with rather than stressing about work or finances or family or whatever. So the first one is called Young Adulterer, and here's the book. I came up with a cover design, but I did not do the cover art for this particular one. Let me see here. The cover was done by Amit Paul, who's a very talented dude. He's available on Fiverr to do book covers, and really, really nice guy. Clearly did a great job with the cover. I mean, if you don't like any of the contents of the book, at least the cover's good. That's why you shouldn't judge a book by the cover, because sometimes it's much better than the book. But this one I had planned since 2011. That was when I first had the seed of the idea for this book, and I was writing some books at that time that I published in college, and they were first person. They were epistolary, taking place on a blog, and essentially I was writing stuff that was really trying to be sophisticated, probably more sophisticated than my age, and even my age now, more literary style fiction, so to speak. And I wanted the opposite. I wanted to keep things fresh and challenge myself, because I hated writing first person. I never did it. And I had just written my most highfalutin style book, and I was kind of directionless at that point, just writing whatever, trying out different things. And so I would write, and I did the exact opposite of what I had done with all my other books, where I wrote first person. It was I guess you could say a comedy book for the most part, and I usually wrote in silence, but for this particular book, I just blasted music or whatever else kind of distraction, just anything to get me out of my element. And that book wound up being titled Emo. The second one, Anti-Counterculture, that one I did kind of the same thing, but I just blasted music that I hated, music that would irritate me, because I wanted this feeling of being an outsider, I wanted this feeling of being out of place, to emulate the feelings of the character, because typically I don't really go through a lot of the situations the characters in my books go through. I'm pretty boring, pretty bland, and the things that are crazy about my life really aren't very cinematic or literary or profound in any way. So I have to kind of emulate that using other art. So vicariously living out scenes that I have to draw from emotionally by what a movie made me feel, or a song or something like that. And this is going somewhere. These two books had a protagonist, or really an antagonist. It was a narrator, but they weren't the hero of the story, so to speak, even though they did get the development and the focus. But they were just telling you the story that I intentionally filled with inconsistencies and lies, because I wanted it to be about how we make excuses for ourselves. I want it to be about how essentially I was just looking at the world in a very different way than I had before, and I was just looking at what trends that I saw with pop culture and just cultural norms that I thought were concerning or funny or hypocritical, and some of which I might have partaken in to some degree. But the central thing about it was just a character who could never take responsibility, who could never straight tell the truth, kind of a Holden Caulfield type. And in the character, you never learn the character's name, and you never really hear anything that isn't filtered through this character's dictation. So there's a character set up in that book that I knew would come back, and I intentionally wrote in a way that they could kind of defend themselves. And with each book, you would learn a little more about this person, and the camera would pull back further and further from this young man's perspective with each entry in the series. The first book takes place almost entirely in a bedroom. The next one takes place in a college campus. And the third one, which is finally getting to Young Adulterer, takes place at a 5-year high school reunion, partially. Very little bit of it does, but that was a central theme. Was the first one was someone who basically a take on the Übermensch in Nietzschean philosophy, or the idea of this character who's, every day was the same for this character. They didn't really progress in any way. They just went rolling in the same Sisyphean rock up a hill and then doing the same thing the next day mentally. And then in the next book, they wound up doing a little bit with their lives, but not doing all that much, and being much more judgmental towards other people, and not being willing to accept judgment bestowed upon himself. And there was one particular chapter, though, in the second book that I think was important, maybe the most important, was that there's a character who he's seeing, I guess you could say, in the first one, and he's jealous, and he's just insecure, and he accuses this girl of being with another guy and all this other crap, and essentially he's told off and said, no, you're wrong, you're falsely characterizing me and being paranoid, and that's for the most part all that you really get out of that, and that was really my template for the third book. That, and I guess I'll get to that once I get to the fourth, but just this character, and it is first person. It's first person, past tense, and the book is just showing you this character who's really arrogant and insecure, and he self-medicates with alcohol, and he is obsessed with pornography, and just eating junk food and being a lazy slob. He's very Falstaffian character. A lot of this character was based on, because at the time I wrote it, I guess there's not much footage or video of me. I don't like being photographed or anything, but I was completely sober. I was like the least amount of weight I'd ever, I think weighed less than 150 pounds at that point in time. I don't weigh myself. And I was just working all the time. Similarly, the where I got the inspiration for the character originally for the first book, Emo, was that I was going to college, I was working, I was struggling with juggling all these things, I was writing books, and I just wanted to take the opposite of what I was doing. I kind of saw it as this doppelganger-esque scenario, and I made various references and jokes about that throughout those first two books. And in this one, I wanted kind of the same thing, where the character was just the opposite of what I was doing in terms of just not trying. We were completely different ends of the spectrum, even if some of the circumstances were the same. He's kind of an evil twin or something, I don't know. But the character, once again, I didn't really relate to. I don't even believe I've been really properly drunk in my life at that point. But he was based largely on the guy from, I believe, Jeff Rosenstock is his name. I had totally forgotten. It's been so long since I listened to that music. But he's based kind of on Jeff Rosenstock a fair amount. Charles Bukowski, Woody Allen's archetypal character. A lot of stuff like that. A lot of just kind of schmucks and losers and morons. not morons like they're stupid, but in the context of this story, that's what I wanted to go for, was a character who's really kind of lowly, and basically someone who always avoided responsibility. That is the first part of the book, going up to the 5-year reunion. And my thesis for the first two books was that, and this is why it was told on a blog, is why it was published on a blog, was that I wanted to be about how we had moved past this Christian America, and now where is our morality, where is the objectivity, and most importantly, and this is the primary obsession of these books, is what does that do with the concept of forgiveness? If there's no Christ, does that mean that forgiveness is a thing of the past? And essentially in this book, Young Adulterer, I structured this triptych, and that's one of the many reasons I call it a triptych, non-trilogy. I structured it so that this book represents kind of more an atheistic philosophy, and the second one, Conditional Love, it represents a more conventionally a Judeo-Christian, or particularly very Christian, maybe even Catholic to some degree, ideology. And the third book, Honest Work, is agnostic, just uncertain, doesn't really have any fixed beliefs. And so for the first book, essentially, instead of seeking forgiveness from strangers on the internet, and with each blog post being a quote unquote prayer, hence why the series has the title Confessions of a Hopeful Romantic. It's a take on Confessions of St. Augustine, and it was from the very beginning meant to emulate kind of religious writings. But in this one, he's going to his 5-year high school reunion because he is essentially trying to prove that he's not him. He's trying to falsely represent himself as more successful than he is, or more interesting and accomplished, which I think is a common trope in fiction, especially comedy. One character I should give proper credit to in this book in general, especially for Conditional Love, was A Confederacy of Dunces, and the primary character, Ignatius. There's a lot of that in the character Wesley Thompson. And one of the big things with young adulterer is that you never know Wes's name until somebody says, and that is said at the 5-year high school reunion. And this book it came out, let me think here, either it came out 5 years after Emo, or it was written 5 years after I had written it. But it was 5 years after. That was always a plan since I was structuring these books in 2011. And essentially, I wanted to have him go back in time and get this second chance. It's really a time travel book, and that's another reason that I don't consider spoilers in my books. I don't mind talking about them because I don't think they're plot oriented. I think they're thematically oriented. And he goes to the high school 5-year reunion, and he knocks up the one that got away in high school, who was named Ione, who's named after Ione Skye from the movie Say Anything, who plays Diane. I think Diane Court is her full name in the movie. And the reason she's named that is just because it's the actress that played the dream movie girl. It's not the actual character. It's the Molly Ringwald, and nothing against Molly Ringwald or Ione Skye or anything like that, but it's about the reality versus the fiction. And in these books, women typically represent the truth and men typically represent fiction, which isn't really a gender battle of the sexes statement. It's just imagery that I chose to use. And one of the big things with this book, and this wasn't my idea, a lot of things in these books, I guess, I don't want to say they're not my idea, but they were inspired by people or things that someone had said to me. But this one particularly is the one that I think was directly from someone else. I couldn't determine whether I wanted a male to live with Wes or a female, actually specifically a brother or a sister. So I had written some chapters where it was a man speaking to Wes, and others in which it was a female, because I wanted this character to be the foil to Wes. I wanted them to assume the role of the doppelganger, rather than falsely inviting people to try to see the formerly anonymous narrator in me. I'm now trying to get them to draw comparisons between him and his brother or sister. And I was telling a friend about this, and they said, well, why don't you just, because I was telling how lazy I was, and I didn't look forward to editing it. And they said, why would you choose male or female? Why don't you just make them trans, and then you don't have to? And it was kind of a joke, but I thought that's actually an interesting idea. And once again, I really want the character to emasculate Wes. I found this idea fascinating of Wes having a brother, and Wes is looking at him like, oh, look at that jawline, look how he grows a scruff and I can't. And comparing himself, but meanwhile, his brother's masculinity was kind of a curse to the brother. And I found the dynamic interesting. I found it interesting that they could live together and Wes wouldn't know this whole other side of his own brother's life. And they could get to know each other throughout the course of the book and bond. So, of course, that was scary, because that immediately invites me as, a straight dude for criticism or whatever. And I don't care if people, if they have an issue with it, they're fine to have an issue with it. I obviously, Wes and Matt bust each other's balls throughout the entire book and make various jokes about each other because they're siblings, and that's what they do. And And I ultimately think I think Matt is the strongest character in the book. I mean, I can't imagine that it's particularly harmful, the representation in this one. At least the next one's in another story entirely, but we'll get to that. But I wanted it to be a dynamic, too, of two people in one thematically. And this is very light. Like I said, I might just do a series talking about these books where I'd go over the specifics, and that will be structured. That won't be me rambling. There won't be, so you won't get so much of that in those. If I did that, I would commit to it, and it would be shorter videos or just tighter structure ones with actual bullet point kind of listings. But for now, I'm just bullshitting because my book's out today. And I mean, what can you really do in 2020 to celebrate your book release? I mean, I didn't do anything before to celebrate it necessarily, but this year especially, you're just stuck. So anyhow, we get into the 5-year, and Wes wants forgiveness, and he has denied it, which is representing, of course, atheism and other people. I mean, how unwilling we are to forgive others when we ourselves are so imperfect. And he takes that loss pretty hard. And, I mean, going over all the points of the book, plot point by plot point, isn't particularly interesting to me or to anybody, I wouldn't think. But the long and short of it is that he winds up reconnecting with the one that got away. He ends up accidentally impregnating her. And now he is forced to deal with that. He has to provide financially to be a father. Emotionally, he has to become one. And he also has to somehow break this news to his the girl that he is seeing at the time. He has to deal with his alcoholism. He has to deal with his issues with his father, which in this book, the father represents in this book Wes's relationship with God, and when he's calling his dad, and he, specifically towards the very end of the book when he's calling his dad and there's no answer, it's about him feeling as though prayer is useless. I don't see the father as a literal character in any of these books, to be honest. He's more of a symbol. But he does do this largely thanks to Matt and Ione and Brendan, her boyfriend at the time, worked through their issues with her not quite infidelity. There's one of those friends that are on a break situations. They wind up working through it, and at the end of the book, Wes is a father. He's taken responsibility for his life. He's closer to his brother than he ever was, and that's essentially it. I mean, it's a comedy book at its core. There's a lot of stuff in it, a lot of science fiction elements that people can either choose to pick up on or they may not. A lot of time travel stuff, just going through your memories and trying to fix what you've done wrong in the past and having that opportunity, and how ultimately the futility of that will always make another mistake. Not to call, anybody's birth a mistake, but you know what I mean. There's always going to be consequences for actions, a butterfly effect scenario. And it's a pretty light book, and I wanted to write it for a very long time, since 2011, and let's see, I wound up writing it in 2016. No, I think I wrote in 2017. Either way, I've been planning for a long time, and it felt like the right time to do it. And essentially, I think so much of it for me was I had just been, I don't know what, I had left / been kicked out of Renaissance Men. And I'm not saying anything about that. I'm not going to gossip or whatever. There's nothing to say, really. I was in Renaissance Men for a long time. I started the company, partially, of course. I'm not saying I did. I'm saying I was one of the people at the table to start it and had been involved with it for quite a while. And ultimately things ended. And, I still support everybody in Renaissance Men, and, wish that other people would check out their content and all that. I don't necessarily do myself, but I have no hard feelings, and it was mostly a great experience. And, I was feeling very insecure artistically at the time because I was not satisfied with, I'll put it this way, I was not satisfied with my work in the final Renaissance Men feature length, the second of 2. And I just was then out of Renaissance Men, which I had not been ever planning to leave and did not really want to. due to certain circumstances that had come through. Once again, not blaming anybody. If anybody's to blame, it's me. I'm eschewing no responsibility of my own. But at the end of the day, I was out of it, and I felt very guilty. I felt depressed about it and insecure creatively. I've been in a creative depression for a long time after that, and the book that I'd written before Young Adulterer, Aaron Texas Book Club, is still not available. And it probably will be someday. I'm going to get to that towards the end of this video. So I didn't really know what to do, and this book really helped reestablish myself, I felt like, where I then kind of knew who I wanted to be as a writer and knew which direction I wanted to go. And I wanted to write a book that was baseline enjoyable, that it was fun, but had a little bit more beneath the surface. I think the Aaron Texter book, I think that was, you could say it's a fine book. You could probably say it's okay or whatever. I'm not going to criticize my own books or, rate them. I've done that in the past comedically, and I would be fine to do that again. But ultimately, I think it was a very safe book. And in that way, it was boring to me, where a character is just what you see on the page. A line of dialogue or a joke is just a joke. There's no hidden meanings. It's just entertainment. And that, for me, quite frankly, it's just not enough. At least not in the sense of what I wanted to be doing at that time. So I wrote this book. It was a comedy, but it was also a science fiction book, but it was also a weird continued narrative where it's a sequel and a reboot of two books I had already written. And, I think it did a good job, and I was really happy with it. I'll get, at a later point in this, I'll get to the release of that book, because I didn't intend for it to be released through me, and that actually describes why I started Longshot Books. And I'll say I started Longshot Books. I didn't start the company with that name or anything, though. I had reached out to Maureen, and she agreed to it, and then we started it. But I was the first person to initiate that or whatever, which I'll take a little bit of credit for, but not much, because I wouldn't have gotten far if it wasn't for her. But so what I did was I wrote the book. I never wanted to put it out myself. I was done with self-publishing. I thought it was pointless. The first book in the series, Emo, I released on paperback, and it sold a total of 0 copies. The second one, I set a release date, I advertised it, and I didn't release it, just to see what would happen, to see if anybody, a single person, would reach out to me like, what's going on? Did this happen? Whatever. And nobody did. Nobody cared. Even people who I was very close with, who I talked to about it for years, didn't care. And I was hanging out with people. I still have this to this day. It really isn't something that one person does or whatever. But when I'm talking about writing, what I like to do is just stop before finishing my thought. And I don't do it as severe, because people generally kind of care about me, I guess, now compared to in the past. But I'd be talking about my book, and I'd just stop mid-word. I wouldn't even finish the word, and they wouldn't notice. And so I thought, I'm writing for me. I'm writing because I like to write. I'm writing because I love this story and these characters. I'm not writing for praise. I'm not writing for money, or, I don't even keep my money out of my books. Not that I've made enough to keep, but I just don't feel comfortable with that. And that helps me with some of the riskier stuff of the books, where, like in Young Adulterer, all the money went to a charity, and same with Conditional Love. So at the end of the day, if somebody's going to accuse me of doing something harmful with these books, which isn't the case, and any recklessness is just due to, I say, ignorance or mistake, rather than any maliciousness. At the end of the day, it's going towards, hopefully, a good cause. I don't really believe in a lot of charities. I think most of them are fraudulent, personally. But hopefully that's not the case. That's just my cynicism. So I was going to agents at the time, though, and sending the book out, and nobody wanted it. And that's cool. The agents were really nice. They were professional. They got back to me in a timely manner, typically well before the time that you would expect to hear from an agent. And there's really only one that I was excited about. And she was inactive, and she was kind of strange. She'd make fun of other people's books. She did nasty reviews, kind of scathing. Talked about watching more movies than she read books. And I just thought that was cool and infectious and inspiring. Like, that's the kind of person I want to work with. I don't want to work with some business suit. I don't want to work with someone that's just typical agents. I mean, no offense, they're good people. It's just not people that I personally get along with or have interest in working with in many ways, because they're good at what they do, but what they do isn't what I do. We're just two separate fields. I think they're business people and I'm an artist, and I'm not saying you can't be both, but I think it's pretty fucking hard. So I was just doing this. I just felt like I couldn't relate. And it's so funny because I've been accused of like some weird white supremacy shit with Longshot, where like I talked about like I want to start a publishing house for people like me, and be like, what do you mean people like you? You mean white people? And because this was when Trump got into office, so like it was like everything that you did was potentially, you know, a dog whistle or whatever. And I was really just talking about like, I don't know, geeks, weirdos, freaks. I say those words lovingly. People who just didn't quite fit in with the current trends of literature, and not that they're maybe archaic, or not that they're maybe ahead of the curve, but they're just on a different wavelength. And yeah, just the outsiders. I really just want a kind of Breakfast Club situation for these people who maybe aren't commercial, but they're not strictly literary. Not that we're not interested in those kind of things, but just people who couldn't quite relate to the literary world as we currently know it. And that's no disrespect. I mean, there's a lot of great books coming out. Once again, I mean, I refuse to say anything negative about the agents that I've interacted with, that I've seen. I refuse to say anything negative about a lot of authors that are working today, because quite frankly, I don't want to lie. And if I have something negative to say, I mean, I'll definitely say it. I think I've proven that over the years, but those experiences have always been very, very positive, even though they're all negative in the sense that it's always me getting rejected or whatever. But so that was the origin of Longshot Books and how Young Adulterer contributed to that. After Young Adulterer, I started working on Conditional Love, and this is where it gets really difficult and kind of interesting for this video, because I can't say a lot, because a lot of it's very, very fucking legal, and some people aren't alive due to some of the things that happened. It's not like somebody's like murder or anything like that, but like it's just a cultural thing where specifically like the opioid crisis, and just stuff in my hometown, and people that maybe I had gone to school with, or other people gone to school with, that I was realizing that my childhood and that the place I'd grown up in really was not as innocuous as I had pictured it. You know, I had this kind of Norman Rockwell picture of rural suburbia, and that just wasn't quite the case. And I really looked into that, the opioid stuff and suicide rates and a lot of stuff like that, because I just had some stuff come up at that time that had nothing to do with me or anybody that could be really associated with me directly, but it was just something that really was traumatic for me that happened at the time, loosely connected to that stuff, just drugs in general and all that, which happened to be opioids, and a lot of stuff that from my childhood kind of resurfaced, like repressed memory stuff. And there's a lot of stress at that time with a lot of stuff going on, and it was just this snowball effect where more and more got worse and worse and worse from roughly 2016, I would say, until 2018, mid 2018. It was like, if it was like 2016, maybe it was like a 3 out of 10. It was like 2, and then like negative 10 out of 10, whereas more and more shit kept piling up. And quite frankly, around the time of 2016, I really didn't want to be writing anymore after Young Adulterer. I never thought about another book after that. Actually, that's a lie. I did. I either wanted that to be the end of it, or I wanted to continue doing it every few years, and had this idea of just occasionally checking in on these characters, and this cast would get larger and larger with each book, and would start writing from other perspectives as they went on, and as I had already done with Aaron Texter and other things that are unreleased, and now Honest Work, which I'm very grateful lets me get out of Wes Thompson's head, because it's not always the best place to be. But But the point is, with by the time that I started writing Conditional Love, I was ready for my life to go away from fiction, away from producing art myself as the artist, and I wanted to start helping other writers get their stuff out. I really, I guess I was just looking to settle down and be old and boring, and that would have been great. That would have been ideal. But that's just not how it worked out. And essentially, I had a lot of mental, psychological stuff that just compounded and compounded. So I got a few chapters of Conditional Love done. And then roughly in 2018 into 2019, I had seriously committed to writing it. And the reason all this is important for this particular book is that when I started writing it, when I structured it, certain things had been planned, but I didn't quite know. And I was listening to Slayer at work one night, and there was a lyric, "Before you see the light, you must die." And I thought that was a really awesome, just a cool statement, but a profound one. And I couldn't get out of my head. And I was listening like 3 times on repeat. And then I thought, like, that's it. That's my next book. I want to write about that. I want to write about, biblically, there's this concept of baptism by fire and growth through suffering. And I wanted to write about that. And I thought the irony was so great that I would write my most unhinged and crazy book while I was at the most stable point in my life. Because quite frankly, even though I was dealing with stress of like, where's America going? I guess I can talk about this much because this really isn't saying anything about anybody specific, but I was looking at where I wanted to be as an adult, if I wanted to be a homeowner and have a family and be married. And what I was looking at was this idea of, oh wow, small town America is destroyed. They're all on drugs and killing themselves, and if I ever have a child, I don't know where I would hide them to keep them safe. That's a good way of putting a lot of it. Is that it was almost just a scary real estate thing, where I was just afraid of America and still am. And largely, though, I was doing phenomenally in many ways, and I just love this idea that you can do your craziest art when you're at your most content or your happiest. I still believe that. I couldn't have written half the stuff that I wrote if I wasn't at the time in stable relationships, or I wasn't happy or sober or whatever. I don't really understand this tortured artist thing, or I shouldn't say I don't understand. I don't identify with it. And like when I'm having like rough times, I'm not like churning out pages. I don't know how people do that, or if that's even true, or how that goes. But that's never been my experience. And I just love the irony of that, and I love that once again, Wes and I were on completely different wavelengths of when he was suffering the most. I was at my most comfortable. And of course, what really started to hook me was that this would be my last book. And the reason that I wanted that was because as soon as I knew the final chapter of the book, I remember walking around thinking it one morning. I worked overnights at the time, and the chapter came to me. It was like a movie scene, and I'm not a visual thinker, hence why I'm such a bad writer. I can't picture what I'm writing, what my characters look like. I'm very, very unimaginative. But this particular chapter, this ending, just hit me. I knew exactly what I had to do. And I knew that it had to go from past tense to present tense. And it had to be kind of seamless. And I knew I wanted to take place at a wedding. And there's a big thing with the young adulterer goes from three different timelines in one chapter. And it particularly focuses on dances, a high school dance, like a prom situation. The character dancing for the first time with a girl. And actually, I think the other one isn't really focused on dancing. It's going to the high school reunion, which people dance at, I guess. I don't fucking know. I didn't get invited. So the ending of this book would be them dancing, but in the young adulterer, they're dancing in a circular kind of motion, And in this one, it's no longer that. It's no longer past tense. So there's no... Wesley Thompson is forgiven. He's baptized. He doesn't have to live in regret anymore. And there's particularly 2 images in it that are pretty on the nose, where one is at the table he's sitting at right before the ending of this wedding. he has a glass of water right next to wine, and now that he's sober, he's turned wine to water rather than, Christ, of course, doing water to wine. And there's a dove in the windowsill, which I don't know how often doves just fly into windowsills, but it doesn't matter. I don't write these books for realism purposes. Not all the time. Certain details I like. When characters cry, I like to describe their snot. I grew up in horror movies, so I like blood and guts and all that in my literature. I love those little details, but I'm not interested particularly in blood. I prefer other human fluids that are nasty and, in my opinion, more visceral to get reactions out of people. Snot and drool being my favorites, which is a very weird trend. I guess if Tarantino has feet, I've got boogers. But yeah, I wanted the book to end on that, and I was just describing it to myself and thinking, that's it. I mean, that's where I want to sign off. That's the end of Todd Crawford books, as far as I'm concerned. And I stand by that. I still think that's the end for me. It's just, for books built around time travel, why does my last book have to be written chronologically last, So the big thing with this book, though, and this is where it gets really shaky and tough. I mean, I still think about this decision all the time and wish that I could have changed it. There's a chapter specifically dedicated to this in Honest Work, where in Young Daughter, we find out that Matt is transgender, and in this one, Matt is super messed up on drugs, and eventually commits suicide. And it's a huge shift for that character who was originally responsible and working, and generally a moral anger to Wes, to now being a complete and total train wreck. So how do you make that jump? And once again, another reason why I call it a triptych rather than trilogy. It's not, in my opinion, these books aren't advancing the characters in a linear fashion, where we get from point A in the hero's journey, like the top of the hero's journey, then all the way back around to where they're finally complete and fully well-rounded. I try to see it more human, where it's really just paintings of the characters from a different angle with each book. And how I see it is Wes lived with Matt and did not understand what he was going through in the first book. And in this one, I had to change some things. I mean, I had to really come up with a almost believable-ish in a million years reason for Matt to be in such a poor state. But what I came up with was Matt getting hooked on painkillers, which led to the opioid stuff, which was a development that I followed very closely at that time. And there's a common thing that people get hurt at work, get put on painkillers, and they get addicted. And that's what happened to Matt. And on top of that, as we learn throughout the course of the book, Matt eventually, or actually in the beginning chapters, we don't know this, but Matt is grieving over his aborted son. And that goes into the cover of the book. There's no cover art in the version printed. It's just this font where it says blue on pink because boy and girl, which represents, Matt's obvious gender identity, but also the uncertainty. You don't know that it's a son, but it's a son. Matt had a son, and the cover was a baby's head, and then like a baby doll. I should clarify. It's a baby doll head, and then the arms and legs scattered about. Like on the when you have an abortion and they pull the limbs, they have to reassemble the baby, and it's an old tray. And I don't know the specifics of this. I mean, I've seen it happen actually, in weird internet stuff, instructional demonstration medical videos that I've seen, and researching for stuff. And but the point that I want it to be like almost like a tribal depiction of a sun, sun, up in the sky. And I wanted to represent that and just be a provocative image that would be eye-grabbing. But I didn't want to ask anybody else to do that. And I did it. I made a poster myself for the reading of the book. And at the end of the talk about the book itself, I'll get into the releases for these first two books. And I made it myself. And I love that poster. I have it right there. I'm looking at it. I can't really fit it in frame here, or else I'd show it to you. But the thing is, and it's really funny because the book largely is based around Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. It's also very much based on Confederacy of Dunces, 2 books that I really enjoy, particularly Confederacy of Dunces, which is one of my top 5 of all time. And these ideas that things could be politicized that maybe aren't intended to be, and a fear and anxiety that I have as an artist that things I say will be taken out of context to mean something they may not. Because I don't write from a political place. I try to write from just an artistic place or a spiritual place even, but never political. And I'll get into that in a bit, but the funny thing with it, the great irony is that when I laid it out, the baby's limbs, I had them bent in kind of an L shape, and it looked to me, and I don't really know how to do, I don't know how to draw a swastika. I don't know the exact way that they look. I don't spend much time looking at them personally. Not really a pleasant sight for me, but it looked to me like a swastika made out of severed baby limbs, baby doll limbs with the little the parts that fit into the body that you plug in. I forget what they're called right now, but I just decided that I should probably not do that cover, but who knows, maybe we'll update it someday. And anyhow, yeah, so getting into political stuff with the book, this book was planned to be after the Trump presidency. And it did feel at the time, especially, like it should be different because the world was different. And it was. The way people talked to each other had changed. The way that art was being released had changed, for the worse, I might add, in both respects. And there was a lot of tension. There was a lot of conflict. I don't blame it on the election. It was coming either way. I mean, these things have been growing and growing since at least, I'm going to say 2009 is when I remember it starting personally. But they had come to fruition, and it was crazy. And I was being asked by other writers at the time who have since ditched me for these exact reasons. But they're saying, like, oh, well, how are you going to change your books now that Trump's president? What are you going to write about to, like, reflect it? Which I think is fucking preposterous. Like, who wants to read a Todd Crawford book to, like, know how to vote? I think that's insane. I don't even think people should care about my opinion, let alone go to my books for them. And, I'd entertain the idea because I thought it was a fascinating opportunity to scrapbook this period in history. It felt like, wow, this is something that, kids will, I mean, maybe not my kids, I probably won't have them, but people's kids will ask them about. And I just was fascinated by all that was happening. I was kind of obsessive, to be honest. I think I pissed some people off because I was just so interested in all these narratives and counter narratives, and it was just a wild time, a really crazy time, a very interesting time, and quite frankly, in my opinion, a much better time. It's even though I'm talking about it negatively, where I'm like, oh yeah, we had Charlottesville, we had all this fucking shit with like Russia narrative, and you also had like audits of Trump was audited by Obama illegally and all this shit, and it was just crazy. It felt like we were living in a Thomas Pynchon novel, and for my particular brand of OCD, it was like a fucking Easter egg hunt. It was a lot of fun. But I had begun structuring a book, and I still think this is a cool idea for a book, and it was going to be called Alt Fright. And it was basically about a kid who he's in high school and he gets radicalized over the course of the book as like an American History X or something. And he starts out, and you kind of, what I wanted to do was run the gamut where he feels maybe betrayed by the typical views, and by typical I say left wing. I mean, we're talking about literature here. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. And it would eventually go towards more prototypical views, and then eventually cross the Rubicon and go insane, and then you get into like an Elephant, Gus Van Sant kind of situation. But I didn't want to do that because I hated researching it, because I fucking hate listening to people like Richard Spencer, and that kind of just like sickens me and just upsets me, and it's just not fun. And I like fun. I like fart jokes. I don't like serious discourse. So I didn't do that. And I had started drafting this book, and it was more based around the idea of baptism by fire. And I just started to worry, especially with the Matt character, which was never intended to be depicted as a protected class or whatever you may have it. I don't know the correct word, so I apologize for not using it or whatever. Like, I was going to fucking watch this. But I began to worry about this book, about the way people were interpreting things. How would they see this? Oh, why'd you kill off this character? And the reason for that was because I was not killing off a character. I was killing off a hang-up of Wes's at being a father. Which is that, to me, Matt represented, especially in this book, an artist. I mean, with him dressing up in certain ways and going out, to me, that was like David Bowie or something, a representative of that. And that's not to speak for any culture or any specific kind of person. In the context of this book as a work of art, the character doing that represented these kind of themes, because so much about the books are about the process of creation, and childbirth in the books represents creating a book, writing a book, a work of art, and the collaboration necessary between man and woman, artist and muse, in order to accomplish that. And so I wanted to kill Matt off because I wanted it to be the last book. Now, Matt was always intended to die. That was even in anti-counterculture. Wes has a dream sequence in which it even says how Matt dies, or Matt dies in a car accident. The context is removed, but it's the same thing. It's still the same manner of death. And I always knew it was going to happen, but I didn't quite know when. I didn't think it was going to happen in a book. I figured it would just be at one point, this character would no longer be around and it would be mentioned. And there would then be this repression from the characters that they had lost one of their tribe. But Matt had become so important to me in young adulthood that I felt like there was some send-off necessary. So it was important for me to kill off the artist and let the man remain and survive. But also I wanted to get into the concept of, so the first book was about a book being made. Young Daughter is about reinvention. This one was about death. It was birth and death. So the abortion stuff came into play, which then further complicated all of this. And by no intentional design, it was just what I was being told to write, so to speak. I don't believe in the concept of the muse. It goes against my religion, but you could say what it was. You could say it was like God, or the art itself talking to me. I don't care. I don't really think about it that way. I just accept it. I don't question it. But I knew that's what had it. That was the truth. If I wrote something else, it would not be. It would be a lying to the audience. So I was looking at all this. I was like, "Fuck, this is never gonna fly," and it's going to be so offensive and so ill-wrought that it's just going to be an embarrassment if I don't walk on a tightrope, essentially. And that's a tough thing with getting into that other character, Teresa, which I don't have the time for. But essentially, all you need to know about Teresa is that it's a representation of Wes interpreting this person as someone more significant than they are, not just in terms of Matt's downfall, but in terms of the context of the book. There's really no larger purpose for Teresa other than to represent misogyny and women being victim of male violence. That was a big thing with Matt and Wes at the beginning, where Wes hears Matt's voice and confuses it with his own, because it is his own. And that is another act of time travel where he's hearing himself yell at Teresa, but he hears it in Matt's voice because they are one and the same. They are doppelgangers. They are not necessarily characters in a strict, solid sense. They are masks seen in a dream. And the thing with the abortion was, with the artist dead, there would be no more works of art. There won't be a baby. So that was a tough thing. So if you've ever read the book, we're uncomfortable with some of this stuff in it. But I was like, who fucking cares? So like, if you watch, I don't know, like a slasher movie, we'll say, and that's been done before, like Black Christmas or Nocturnal Animals, but not quite in this way. But like, it's a slasher, it's a home invasion movie, and the girl's home and she's being stalked by her ex-boyfriend, and it turns out that she aborted his child and he's coming back to get revenge. That's the framework of this book. I don't know, like, if people misinterpret that, I just don't know what to say, because it's laid on so fucking thick. Like, the bad guy in the book, the villain, is trying to hurt a woman under false pretenses, and it's not celebrated or depicted in a positive manner. The same with some of the harsh comments made towards Matt when Matt's in the hospital, because in the first book it's kind of funny where, they have this banter and they make fun of each other. And this one I want to flip it on its head, where it was just Wes, and it's pathetic and kind of frightening, where he's literally calling him slurs and saying horrible things to him. And he's doing it to provoke him, but it doesn't do anything because Matt is dead. And I wanted that stuff to be provocative emotionally, but I wanted to be clear that Wes was the bad person. That is why alt-fright is included in the narrative where a character's writing that, because the steps described in the book are the same. It's the same trajectory that Wes has, except instead of extremism, he's mistaken for it multiple times, and it's things that explicitly look political but are sheer coincidence and are just emotional narratives, which is a representative of how I viewed the book, where it was just first he's balding, so he has to shave his head, and he's invited to this event on campus, and there winds up being protests, and he gets caught up in it. And so he is mistaken as a skinhead, which, once again, this is all just Confederacy of Dunces. This is nothing new. And then you get into the transgender stuff with Matt, and then you ultimately get into him wanting to murder a woman for having an abortion, and basically acting out like Falling Down or something like that with Michael Douglas, or whatever, Fight Club, that kind of, taxi driver, crazy person tries to enact vengeance situation. But I will say this much for Teresa, and I'll probably end on that note for this particular section of the discussion, is that Teresa was named after Tiresias from the Homeric poems, who was a seer, a fortune teller. I'm probably getting one of those words wrong, but essentially I wanted to evoke that with the name, and her last name is Peel, which is named after I believe it's a volcano, Peel, which is where men would be sacrificed. So I wanted her character, at least the name, to represent the absolute brink of Wes's masculinity and his ego, and just this dynamic that I created in the book about how oftentimes great artists are bad people, specifically male artists, and how they treat females. And Wes's father represents that, of course, as well, because you see Wes's father in this one, and he is a man. He's not a voice on the phone, so it's a mixed metaphor. I'm guilty of that, but I kind of see it as a different interpretation. Once again, it's a triptych, not a trilogy. It's 3 pieces of art that complement each other, not 3 books that tell a 3-part story. And this one, he actually is Wes in the future. Once again, it's a time travel thing, whereas I think that Matt is kind of a alternate dimension version of Wes. If you want to get into quantum theory, this is his father in the future, in other dimensions, changing based on the choices that he makes in the book and how he treats other people. His father's character changes a little bit to reflect that. Not too much, because I want to keep it like a consistent character, but I still wanted it to have that flavor. And specifically, this character is based around Charles Bukowski, and I really said Woody Allen, but to be quite honestly, it really wasn't. I disagree with a lot of things that Woody Allen has said and done, but I don't believe all of the allegations against him, and he just wasn't based around, he's not a New York Jew. He's an alcoholic, small town kind of hick man. And so he was based around Bukowski, and a little bit after Bill Cosby, who I grew up on and was my favorite stand-up comic as a kid. And just this idea that you look up to someone and they wind up not being who you think, or they, the artist behind the man may not be as good of a person as you would like them to be, unfortunately. So I think that's about it for Conditional Love, except for the title. The title was made because in this book, I wanted to progress from a bar to a church, hence why the 5-year reunion took place in a bar that was once a church. And In that one, he's an alcoholic. And in this one, he's in a classroom. He's a student. He's not in the church yet, but it's kind of getting there. And by the end, in the barn, of course, Christ was born in a barn. Once again, very on the nose. beat you over the head with its symbolism. But I chose this title for the book because I wanted to represent the limitations of man and how we put criteria on our relationships or what we're willing to accept of other people. Meanwhile, we are constantly asking forgiveness ourselves in the dichotomy of Wes. And it was originally titled Not Enough for a very long time. And I really didn't even know until the book was just about over that it would be titled Conditional Love. Because I really thought about just keeping two titles, and I thought about a cover that you could flip over. So, like, if it's upright, it's Conditional Love, but upside down, it would have, like, if conditional is, like, right at the top, upside down, it would say Not Enough. And that would further embellish this idea of multiple dimensions. Another thing I want to bring up is that Wes's father is called Don, named after Don Coscarelli of Phantasm. There's a character in the book by the name of either Angus or Rory, which is after Angus, well, the stage name Angus Scrim, who played the tall man in the Phantasm movies, whose birth name was Rory. And I chose Conditional Love, though, because ultimately, in terms of Wes's spiritual journey, he has now almost adopted this egomania of wanting to put himself on the cross and wanting to be the one forgiving, because he feels as though he has made all the changes he needs in life. He's done, so now he can forgive other people. But ultimately, being a mortal man, his love is conditional. He is incapable of that. That is why this scene at Teresa's house is the climax of the book, because he accepts in some way that he has limitations. He can't forgive her. Even though you as the audience aren't being asked to forgive her, you're not being told that she did anything wrong at all. In his mind, he falls short, and that's essentially it. So that's why it did eventually get that title. However, getting into the release event, that was titled Not Enough, and the specific reason for that was I wanted to separate the two things. I didn't just want to call it something boring like Conditional Love Live. Conditional Live, that would have been cool. But I wanted to make it its own unique entity in some capacity. And I also want to further this idea that certain things would be different. So I changed certain details in the live reading that were not in the book, so that you would understand that this was just a slightly different thing. And just a little hints drop. The biggest one that I specifically remember being that in the places in the print book where Rory is called Rory, he is now called Angus. And the characters who thought that he was called Angus now call him Rory. And the Phantasm books deal with things like time travel and multiple dimensions and different realities and all that. So that the people who have seen those movies would hopefully pick up on that. If not, well, that's why I explained it to you. But the first book, Young Adulterer, I did a reading event, and it was a live thing. There's like 4 or 5 supporting acts or something. I shouldn't say supporting acts. They weren't really supporting acts. They were just different people who read before me. We did it in terms of first name, and it happened to be my book's release event, but it was also just an event. You know, I'm not putting myself in any position of authority over them, or definitely not importance. I clearly was not the best reader there. I was probably the worst one there. But I then did the next day, or I'm sorry, not the next day. There was 2 readings. I was confusing them. I did it with people in a live audience because the last time I had done a public reading, it went very poorly, and it really just kind of bruised my ego and helped contribute to that insecurity I felt, where I knew I had to write this book to prove to myself that I was a decent writer. And similarly, I wanted to prove myself that I could be at least a competent performer in some capacity. And I think the event went very well. I'm very happy with it, and appreciative of everybody who's contributed. But it's not really me. I don't like going places and being MC and public speaking and all that. I mean, I'm not like against it, but it's just not me. It's just uncomfortable. I can do it, but it feels like a lie. So for Conditional Love, I thought about doing that, but I want to do something different. I want to do something bigger. And I thought, how am I going to do something that's going to, I did a reading. I showed myself that I could do this, but now I know I can do that, so I don't want to do that. Because it's not something I have a genuine interest in. It's just something I want to prove myself I could do. So I thought about doing all of Conditional Love in a live setting. I want to rent out an art gallery to do it, or just an art space of some sort. And I actually had a set planned, outfit and all that would be all esoteric. So it would all contribute in some capacity. And I think one thing I considered at one point was getting 2 different carriages that would be in each corner of the rooms. There'd be one on the left and one on the right. That would be different colors. And inside there would be 2 baby dolls, one of which was just a live baby, and the other would be dead. And it would be painted and maybe have, I don't know, jam or something on it, like that Beatles cover. So you would have a living and a dead baby to represent the 2 in these books. But ultimately I decided not to do it because the book is absolutely a wrecking ball and insane. And no business would ever want me reading from it because it is so violent and so offensive and so outrageous that regardless of context, you just can't have people walking in to get a coffee and you have some lunatic, talking about someone harassing a woman or wanting to kill somebody or, talking about race dynamics in modern literature. You can't have that. And I respect businesses. I don't want to offend people. I don't want to upset business owners. I don't want to take their space and ask them for a favor, only to, in my opinion, spit in their face by bringing that kind of performance into their establishment. Now, I've heard those kind of things. I remember downtown, I was having dinner, and there was someone saying things equally offensive down at Market Square in Pittsburgh. I had to listen to that crap, but, I wasn't wearing a dress and a button that says it's her it was her turn or whatever, so I don't get to do those things. But no, I probably could have done it and Trojan horsed my way in and, seemed respectable and then read this crazy, horrible book. But I just didn't feel that was ethical, and I didn't want to do that. So I came up with the idea to just live stream it on YouTube because I wanted to be filmed anyhow because I wanted proof that I did it. So I did it, and I would practice for about half an hour to an hour at a time, just read through the book, and eventually started to do it the whole way through. And it's available on my YouTube. I think that's my last upload. I only use this for promotion for my books anymore, and I don't really promote my books because I'm more interested in the art than promoting them, because everything else just goes to Long Shot Books. So I'll include that link down below and follow that. I mean, I'd rather you subscribe to that page and follow that than my own. That one is at 22 subscribers and mine is at 24 somehow. So I'd love it if Longshot could finally surpass my YouTube subscriber count. But is like my other if I need a thinking break and I've used 4 times in that sentence, then I go to but. Just add a conjunction and hope we can find something that will fit in the other end of it. But yeah, so I live streamed it, and that was really fun. And people showed up, and I took about 20 piss breaks because my throat got sore from speaking so much. It was a 4-hour stream, as I recall, if not 4.5. And it was on my birthday. Both these were on my birthday because that's what I wanted to do for my birthday was something creative, I guess. Give myself an aneurysm from stress because I had to do some kind of public speaking event on my birthday. But I made it through. Technically, I crossed the finish line reading the book. And that was it. I mean, essentially for YA, I needed something good. I needed an ego boost of some sort. And for Conditional Love, I really felt like, okay, so I'm established to some degree. Now I have to do something that nobody else has done, that people are going to think is crazy, like some David Blaine shit, because I don't want to be one of 200 writers in Pittsburgh. I want to be the only me. I don't want to be a certain genre or a certain type of writer. I wanted to be the craziest, the wildest, the most outrageous person where it's like, holy shit, nobody's doing this. And you just did it. You recorded this audiobook in one take and it sucked, but you did it and you thought people would actually care, which is even crazier than you doing it. But some people did listen, and I really appreciated that. So I guess that brings us to honest work. So here's the cover, and I'm very proud because this one has my full name, or what I call my real name, and this just shows on the back my 3 books in this triptych. Now there's no synopsis for Conditional Love, and that was intentional. As you can see, that is I don't know if you can't see because of my webcam quality, but it's just a list of my books up until that point. Now the irony here is that these books are about time travel. They're about going to the past and fixing mistakes or regrets. Before publishing this book, Conditional Love, I unpublished all of my books. I think Young Adulterer was out and left out, but all my other books before that were unpublished. So people were pissed, and quite frankly, people were very unsupportive of me at that point in my life. Were angry about it, and that offended me because, like, were you buying my book? Were you telling people to buy my books? Because I see the fucking sales. You don't care. So don't give me crap for making some huge artistic statement. But Conditional Love was written. I mean, and this is true. The book is a retelling of every book I had written at that point in time. So thematically, going off that alone, you can just read Conditional Love, and that encapsulates every book that I've written up until Honest Work, which is its own unique thing after that. And the climax of that, and the scene where he leaves Teresa's house, and this is Wes's redemption thematically, is that what sets the events in motion in the very first book I ever wrote, Clockwork and the Stars, is the murder of a teenage girl by a boy her age. And that was a bad thing. I don't know if it's depicted as a bad. It wasn't cool in the book. It was savage and horrible. But that sets off this horrible chain of events that ends terribly for every one of the characters in that book. And so it's rectified with a time travel event in Conditional Love where Wes is tempted to harm this innocent person and ultimately turns his back and does not. Now, he's not good, but he doesn't make that mistake. He doesn't go that far. As bad as he is throughout these past 4 books, he is not a murderer. And that sets, when he turns back, when he turns around, that's when he starts to get on the right track, at least a little bit more. And that's further cemented by him referring to Brendan, who he once saw as his competition, as his brother, solidifying that idea of a Christian brotherly love of fellow man, who he once saw as an enemy, and which then leads us into Honest Work. So at this point, Wes is no longer a student. He is a TA. He's not a teacher yet. But he is a sub-teacher. But he likes to act as though he is the president of the school. And this gets him into a lot of trouble, of course, because when you have someone, it's kind of a parody to some extent of like someone like me. People are like, oh, you should go to be a teacher or something. Like, that's fucking insane. I wouldn't last a semester. I would say the wrong thing. I've given guest lectures in schools, but in a school, I shouldn't pluralize that because that's dishonest. I've given guest speeches at a school, and even then, it was just mayhem. And I might be fit for a comedy club or something. I'm too much of a pussy for that. But if I had that spine, I would be more fit for a comedy club than I would in an academic classroom. And it's someone who, quite frankly, in this book, Wes is a much better person than I am. I will outright say that. He is, once again, we are at odds ends in each one of these books. And in this one, he has everything together. But he's still not quite there. Hence why he is the TA and not the teacher himself. And I'd always wanted that to be the case since anti-counterculture was in school. Having this opposition to academic environments, which is, inspired largely by my own experiences and also one of my favorite albums, The College Dropout by Kanye West. and just this disillusion with the academic system in America. And don't take that as a fucking support of international education. I'm not saying that Europe or Germany's great just because ours sucks. I don't know our country, let alone others. So when I say America or criticize America, I'm not endorsing other places. I'm just saying this particular one has issues that worry me. But it's him now being able to make those changes to be the teacher that he wanted to have, which unfortunately is not what is expected of him in his job description. It's not what the students even necessarily want. And originally I designed this book to have much more time in the classroom where there were different vignettes of different students who would come up to him. The first was this actually happened to me. I was a student in this situation, and I'm not going to out him, but one of the best professors I ever had, one of the most brilliant people I'd ever met. I didn't do my homework, and it was the first huge assignment of the class, and I didn't have an excuse. So I came up to him, and everybody's handing their paper in as they left the class, and I was the last one out. And I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't do this assignment. I don't know why. I don't have an excuse. I just didn't." And basically, I was gonna ask, like, should I just drop the class? Because, is it that irreparably messed up? And this particular person was my favorite teacher's favorite teacher. My favorite teacher in high school had said, you need to take every one of this professor's classes and you need to cherish them because he is the best teacher that I, as in that teacher, ever had. And he was totally right. But I had put so much pressure on it, and I totally fell on my face with the first hurdle of the semester, my first class I had with him. And he said, turn it in Monday. It was a Friday, I believe, when this had happened. And he said, just get it back to me Monday, and we'll call it even. And it was inspired by that. But Wes, of course, he makes it about pop culture, and it's kind of a funnier scene than it happened to me, which is just a very human, and it was a very human act of kindness. In my situation, it was charitable. In this one, it's a little bit sillier and irreverent. But I want to do that. I wanted each character in his classroom to represent a different book that I had written in the past. And each of them were students of Wes, in the sense that my experiences writing each of these books helped me create this book. And it was an allegory for that. However, I got pretty bored with that idea, to be quite honest. And another thing was that you can only have so many interactions with students that was interesting. So, for instance, with one, I was going to have a student who maybe wrote about his father or his girlfriend or whoever, just someone in his life in a very critical way. And Wes gives a little moral speech to him about, how your writing hurts people. Kind of like how he had to learn that the hard way in his first two books, and Ione confronting him in Young Adulterer about the bad things he had said about her. But I felt like it wasn't really necessary or warranted. And then there was going to be one where a character is dropping the class because she's pregnant, and Wes is talking to her, and she doesn't know what to do. Her parents are pressuring her to get an abortion so that she can continue her academic career. Her boyfriend may or may not be in the picture, if it's even a boyfriend. And essentially he talks to her and just says, hey, you just got to do whatever's right. And so she does, and she does what's right for her, which she decides to keep the kid and drop out of school. And her parents are not approving, and that's eventually what gets him fired. But there's going to be just a situation like that or a situation like that. But quite frankly, after writing like one of them, I was like, this is going to be ridiculous if people have to read chapter after chapter after chapter of Wes having these one-on-one coach moments with each of these kids. And, one thing I'll say with this book is that it's a novella. It's the shortest of the three, and over half the book was cut from it, intentionally so. And I think for the large part it's better for that reason. But I could always add it back in. I'm pretty happy with my decision right now. Maybe in a year I won't be. Maybe readers won't be. It's a huge risk that I took, and one that I could potentially rectify. There's actually more, longer edits of books available than you'd think. And I'm open to that with this particular book, with those sections only, where I put more Wes in the class stuff. So that was the idea for that, and I had always planned on him to be a teacher. I'd always planned for him to have given up writing, and essentially what he was trying to do was he was trying to be an artist when he's not he was trying to be a teacher when he's not a teacher. He's a performer. He is an artist, and he's living in denial of this because he wants to be a father. He wants to be a teacher, blah, blah, blah. And he gets fired for these reasons, because he's too theatrical, because he's just being too human, quite frankly, and not keeping professional distances or whatever. And I'm not, this isn't a thing about teaching or how I think teachers should be, or teachers I've had, commentary on them. It's just this character and what I thought was necessary for his development. And at the end of the book, he was fired. He didn't know what to do. And I'd always wanted the book to end on a one-word piece of dialogue. Always. And he goes to the character that is now Maggie from Conditional Love. And he's like, I don't know what to do. And she says, you know what you have to, you already know what you have to do. And he's like, what is it? Just tell me. And she says, write. And that was going to be the last word, write, W-R-I-T-E. And the further that I got into writing this book, the less honest it felt, ironically. For a book called Honest Work, it began to feel very dishonest to me, whereas I was writing it like crazy. One of the fast writing sessions I've had, where it was just like, I'm not joking myself, I've written like 10 pages of the book in like half an hour. No, that's not true, like an hour. I think 4 pages to 6 in half an hour, which, reading it, you'll probably pick up on that right away, because it's like, well, yeah, no wonder. But it got to a point where I was there and I just hit a brick wall. I could not go anywhere with this book, and I had no interest in it. I didn't want to write. I wasn't excited anymore about it. And it just hit me that it's because I wasn't interested in where the book was going, where the first 2 acts I was in love with, and the third felt like homework, where you have to show Wes interacting with more and more students, and you have the same event play out time and time again, where he acts out and goes a step too far as a teacher, and you need 20 examples of it before you get him canned. And then we examined for the first time Brendan and Ione's relationship from a critical standpoint, where it's hinted out in in Conditional Love, but never explicitly stated that they never should have gotten married. Brendan never should have taken her back, looking at things rationally. But he does because he's a good person and he loves Ione, and she does because she is desperate and confused, and she does care about Brendan. But I don't think she ever necessarily loves him in these books. Maybe in the first one, but not by the second. And the thing with the second is that it's through the lens of Wes, who sees it as this hopeful thing and how you can, grow and change. And the thing with it is that he sees so hopeful as that they grow, but they keep each other. So there's not a loss necessarily. Whereas he sees as them completing their hero's journey, and without having to make sacrifices. But ultimately there's many sacrifices, as you see in the third book. And I really wanted to emphasize that. I really wanted there to be long sequences of Ione at home alone, and them in the car, and it's awkward and silent because they have nothing to talk about, because they have nothing in common except for the roof over their heads and a love of not only Maddie, their daughter, but Wes as well, actually. And that was an important thing for me with Conditional Love and Honest Work, was that Wes and Brendan's friendship will be a major point in both of them. And the whole time I wanted it to build up where you thought Brendan was going to cheat on Ione, and it's inevitable, it's going to happen. And when that moment comes, instead of doing anything, Brendan kind of acknowledges the moment by just announcing that he loves his wife and his daughter to the girl that is tempting him. And instead, Ione commits an infidelity on him, which, in my opinion, is probably more logical, because that seed is already planted in her mind by Conditional Love and, the inception of Maddie. And the thing with Brendan in this book, and that he was what convinced me to write it. I didn't want to write after Conditional Love. I still don't know that I should have. But I had always loved this idea of, I apologize, my throat's getting pretty scratchy at this point in the night. I'd always loved this idea of a tattoo artist who was just demoralized by art for commission, and how he wants to be an artist, but he's just a businessman because it's art by commission. I mean, he's told, I want Spider-Man, so you do Spider-Man. And in real life, tattoo artists are creative within those limitations, and they have their own styles, and people go to them for that. It isn't an indictment or indictment, I don't know which word's right, of tattoo artists, right? I don't believe in tattoos necessarily. I don't agree with them. For me, I don't have interest in them. Other people can do whatever they want. It's A, who cares what I think, and B, I don't care if they get tattoos. That's not my business. But I'm just not personally. It's not something that I enjoy. It's a foreign concept to me. But I'd always love that idea, and that's that statement about art and about how it's a product and you're selling it, but yet you want to express yourself in that kind of tug of war internally. And I love this idea of him having this picture of a drawing he had made when he was much younger and looking at it, longingly. And I just always said, if Ingmar Bergman had made a film set inside of a tattoo shop, that's what I saw in my head when I thought about it. So that was basically the setup for his whole thing. And I'd always planned on Ione being dissatisfied and wanting to write a book, but really it was just an excuse to spend time with Wes. And that's why, there's some plot points in these books. For instance, in Conditional Love, with all the political jargon, the kids in the classroom, ultimately, the only closure that you as the audience needs, in my opinion, I could be wrong on this, it could be a mistake, is that you need to see each of them, and you need to see that even though they have differences, they're all generally decent, if not good people. That may be wrong, they may not be perfect, but they're not crazy. They're not stereotypes. It's not SJWs or Nazis. I don't like those terms. Well, Nazi's a historic one, but in the way it was being used in 2016, that wasn't quite accurate most of the time. You know what I mean. I was showing that these people weren't all as different as they thought that they were. And I didn't need a moment where they all hugged and announced this. You get enough. Similarly, I felt that with Ione and Wes's transformations, whereas Brendan is given that cinematic moment where, there's the build up and then the reveal that he's not going to do it. He's not going to cheat on his wife. I felt like with Ione's book, you don't need a chapter saying, with Wes saying, you're not really working on much of a book, are you? This project isn't going anywhere. You don't need chapter after chapter after chapter of him giving her advice on character development. That's fucking ridiculous and boring. You do get one, and I wanted to demonstrate that Wes is knowledgeable, that he could be a good teacher if he wanted to, that he knows his stuff. But I wanted that to contrast his theatricality in the classroom and his ego trip in the classroom, because essentially I wanted him to see himself as a preacher who didn't really know his place, where he was a preacher trying to speak on behalf of God, or really speak over God, so to speak. It was, sorry for all that speaking. He's a pastor trying to speak over God and trying to assume this authority that he doesn't necessarily have. I didn't want to be entirely wrong, and I didn't want Dr. Casey to be entirely right in opposing him. I certainly don't think at the end of the book, when he is fired and his biased look back at that moment, I don't think that you're supposed to be like, fuck yeah, like punk rock, like Wes, like it's Rushmore or something. I think it's supposed to be just kind of a awkward, tense moment where it's just two people at odds. I don't think you're supposed to be cheering for either one of them necessarily, because they're both flawed and they both also have good intentions in some way. But I totally lost track where it's going with this. But the big thing with Honest Work and the ending of it, like I said, is that Ione's one that commits the infidelity, and I had wanted this to be a long, drawn-out thing, and it began to just... I feel like there was two issues here at hand, is that I would be essentially ripping off movies or songs, or I don't know about books, but definitely movies and songs like Lars von Trier's Antichrist, or Blue Valentine, or Lenata, or some fucking Bruce Springsteen or Taylor Swift song or something. I don't know. And it just felt like, and I'm fine with that. I mean, that's most of my books are kind of collage works of other influences that I've had. I mean, I've never had really any of the experiences depicted in these books, thankfully. It's all, fantasy as far as I'm concerned. And I just didn't have any pitch that was unique for a really harsh breakup story. And it was going to be a long, drawn-out thing where they try to work through their issues, and it just is failing. And there's that Breaking Bad moment where it's like, I fucked Ted, where Brendan is accusing her of being with Wes, and she's like, no, I didn't sleep with Wes, I fucked Ronnie. But it just didn't interest me, and I didn't want to write a harsh breakup book. And I also was just worried that, like, so if I write this and it's a really cruel breakup, are people going to think this is a commentary on this person or that person that I've ever been with? And it has nothing to do with that at all. It was all an allegory for my back and forth relationship with art and wanting to be an artist. And the breaking up the marriage is me kind of accepting that, that may not be my future. And that's what their marriage represented to me in the book. But I wanted to end ultimately on a more human moment of them fighting and then coming to some understanding in the car, which is just one chapter rather than, not joking, like 6 or 7. And there was a big thing with tension between Brendan and Wes, where their friendship's now put to the test. And that's now relegated to a few lines of dialogue. But I just couldn't do it. I didn't have it in me. And I don't think it would have made this book better. Ultimately, I think what's great is that the book is now about 2 marriages, one that is just beginning and one that is at its end, and seeing about honest work versus going through the motions. So those chapters I still like. I still think they're well defined. I still think the funny thing is I cut some of my best jokes from this book, because my plan was always for Wes, his story, to end in the 2nd act, and in the 3rd act he would have maybe 1 or 2 chapters, and that was just the student stuff and him getting fired, and that would be just the end of his story essentially. But it was almost all Brendan and Ione, and it was about saying that the story's moved on past him. There's other stories to tell than this particular character's. But I don't like that it's, I won't say don't like, but I didn't want to write another story just about Wes. I wanted to be as little about him as possible, and he wound up being a major focal point, if not the focal point of the book as it stands. But I think it's stronger for that. I think that I talked to a family member shortly before finishing the book, saying all this and saying how I didn't really know which way I wanted to go with it, and I was going back and forth. And he said, you don't really need to get into all the gory details. And I think for this particular book, that is the truth. And I think it would have hurt the book. I think it would have went off the rails if I had stuck with it. But I'm currently considering, I'd always wanted to do a book about Ione and Brendan for the next year after their divorce, and just following their lives, going in separate directions, and they wouldn't interact with each other. You wouldn't see them interacting at all until the final chapter, which would take place at Wes's wedding now, where they're both invited and are forced to be in the same living space as each other. And I didn't have enough content for it, so I scrapped the idea, and I just thought, like, where can you really go with that? However, there's enough content that I cut from this book that it could be at least roughly a third of a book. So that very well may all wind up in there, because there's always supposed to be flashbacks in this book. I even had planned at some point flashbacks to when Ione and Brendan first started dating, to see the contrast between then and now. However, it just felt too Blue Valentine. But I might chop everything up and do an out-of-sequence book where you see past, present, and future of Brendan and Ione both together and as unique individuals, which is thanks to me chopping the hell out of honest work. I'm not committing to that. I'm not saying it will or won't happen, but it is a option on the table right now. So one final thing I'll get to with Honest Work, and clearly at this point we're well beyond spoilers. I don't believe them, like I said, but we're really, really way past them at this point. The most important moment for me in the book is the moment where after Wes gets fired, instead of him going to Maggie and talking to her, he now prays. And that is once again him relinquishing his ego completely. And also it's a meta commentary on how he's now praying and asking God. He's saying, I'm not going to talk when I pray. It's just me saying, like, I want, I need, and I'm just going to try to listen. And the next 3 pages are just blank. Unfortunately, Amazon does not only publish blank pages, so I just put a parenthetical in brackets at the bottom of each page. It just said, like, this page is intentionally blank. Please white this out so that people can do that, and then they'll be effectively empty. I want to be negative space. And you can either interpret it. Once again, the book is ultimately largely about indecision, about being a fork in the road, and even spiritually. So you can either say it's nothing, there's nothing here, or you can interpret it as it's representative symbolically of God's will, which we don't hear audibly saying, like, call your mother. It's more of a implication, or you're guided by that invisible hand, so to speak. So that was a very important moment for me. I felt like the more I got into the book, the more I felt like that needed to be right at the end, rather than just ending the second act, which it originally did. It was going to be the second act. There's going to be that chapter, 3 blank pages, and then Act 3, which is going to be titled Losing Game. And I got rid of Act 3 in this book because the entire point of the book is that there's no third act in life necessarily, at least in the sense of when you're young and not terminally ill with something, or your life's not cut short and you have a typical lifespan that most people are expected to. That we always say, like, I'm done now I'm a fully formed human and I'm well-rounded and I have no Achilles heels and everything's good. I have reached maximum potential. And that just doesn't happen. That's Wes's flaw in this book. And Losing Game, I wanted to be about how the characters lose. Wes loses his job, Brendan loses his marriage and his daughter. And I started to feel like if I added the title Losing Game into it, that people might interpret it as marriage being a losing game. Because so much of the book is that kind of Woody Allen-esque story of 2 couples, one entering a relationship and the other, or one entering a marriage and the other leaving it. And I felt like people would somehow interpret that as a commentary on marriage, which is not intended to be the case. It's actually about life and how it's not. There's going to be a line of dialogue, which I cut for being too corny, where somebody says honest work doesn't always pay. And it's about how sometimes you just have to do what you think's right, even if you're going to lose, because that's what you can stand with ethically. But I think it's more profound just to have 2 acts in this book. And ultimately, I don't think it's the third act of a story. I think it's the third piece of a triptych, as I've said multiple times throughout this very, very long video, that I will be the only person to watch, probably. And it's not the third act of a story. These characters may return. They may never be read about again. But it's really an epilogue. So, like I said before, to me, it ends on conditional love. The very last chapter of that, to me, is where the story ends thematically. Honest Work, however, I wrote largely because I care so much about these characters. I really enjoy writing them, but I wanted to give them proper closure. They got thematic closure in Conditional Love. I think the implications are all there, and you can make your inferences as a reader. And not everybody's willing to do that. Not everybody's interested in doing that, but you technically can. It's possible. I believe there's enough of a breadcrumb trail in that book to see the future, especially because the future is written in the book if you're willing to look for it. But Honest Work, I just wanted to write a book that it was almost like young adulter, where I just wanted to write a good book. And there's thematic implications, there's symbolism, but ultimately I just felt like I owed it to the characters because they had serviced me so well throughout those past 2 books that I wanted to give people who were interested in that a more story-oriented send-off. But it's not the end of their stories. It's just the epilogue to this particular chapter of each of their lives. So, who knows? Maybe you'll get Other People, which will be the title of the book with Brandon Ione. Probably not. But there may or may not be more to come. But I just wanted to do a video on these because, it's good to be done with them after nearly 5 years, if not 5 years of writing them, because Young Adulter I did write quite a bit of before 2016, before I officially started writing from, first chapter to last of the book. I had written a lot of dialogue and outlined a lot of characters. So I'm always working on books well before I actually begin working on them in a committed fashion. But I'm done with them, and I can't do anything about it. And I'm very happy about that, about being finished with this story as it currently stands. So it's a video. This is kind of an extended pilot for Nobody Asked. And if I ever have the interest and think anybody else will, I'll probably do a series just talking about individual aspects of these books and breaking them down. You're not supposed to explain what you meant in art. You're supposed to leave it up for interpretation. But I'm pretty angry about that. I don't like when people misinterpret my books. That pisses me off. I've had that before, and I find it highly offensive when somebody's saying, like, no, you didn't say this, you said that. Which is fine. People can interpret however they want. They're just wrong. So, who knows? But if you actually watch this, and I doubt anybody will, thank you. And I'm going to include some links down for Long Shot books below. We got 3 books out right now that I'm also very proud of. We had like 3 books in the last month I've been involved with, which is pretty spectacular. The first is The Electric Complex by Lexi Spino. That was out since February of last year. Well, February 2020. Incredible work of poetry and art. I've been promoting it for a year. I've said all there is to say about this book in terms of how great it is, but, do yourself a favor, check it out, please. Next one is an anthology titled Atomic Fly Swatter, Volume 1. Over 30 incredibly talented writers. I'm not going to say over 30 officially, but there's roughly 30 very talented writers involved. By far the hardest editing job I've ever done on anything. That one really kicks my butt, to say the least. So check that book out. That is hot off the press. I'm currently going to start prepping, sending these books out with the author copies. We just had to do some additional work on the actual copies for the author to put little nice messages in there. So it's a little more personal than just, here's your fucking book. It's showing we appreciate you and thank you so much, because we really love this book and everybody's contributions to it. And finally, there is Find Me When You Come Back by Charlie Lefevre, which is another great book of poetry. Really awesome. Really proud to be a part of it. That is much more Marine's project than mine. I'm practically uninvolved with many aspects of it, but I've contributed in the sense of proofreading certain things and being there for the meetings, and it's a Long Shot book, so, not that I like it any less than the others. It's just, it definitely did not have my fingerprints on it nearly as much as the others do. So, thanks again. See ya.